What's up, everybody? Mike Caluzzi here, Pro Tips to Grow Your Biz. So today I have an amazing guest who, you're gonna have to bear with me through the intro because he has a wealth of experience that is just extremely dynamic and interesting. So his name is Terry Tucker. He's coming in from Denver, Colorado today, and Terry is an international podcast guest. Okay, and his topics that he covers are associated with motivation, self-development, and mental health. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played Division I basketball. He has a master's degree from Boston University. And in his professional career, he has worked as a marketing executive, hospital administrator, an undercover narcotics investigator, SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator, high school basketball coach, business owner, motivational speaker, and in the last 10 years, he is a cancer warrior. He is the author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. He has also been featured in the Authority, Global Thrive, and Human Capital Leadership magazines. You could find and connect with Terry at his website at motivationalcheck.com, and you can also find him on social media on those same handles, and that is motivationalcheck.com. And he's on Instagram at Sustainable Excellence Author. So I will, of course, have all those contacts in the links to the show, as well as underneath the podcast, so you guys can get that information. So obviously his book is accessible on Amazon as well, which I'll provide that link. And I am super excited to welcome Terry to the show. So welcome, Terry.
Thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, man. It's not very often that I come across people who have a far more diverse background than I do, but man, I'm a piker compared to what you've done. Wow. SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. That's someone you don't meet every day.
Yeah, those usually aren't your neighbors,
Wow,
and that kind of thing. Yeah, it was a tremendous experience, worked with some great people. I always get the question, there was a movie back in the 90s where Samuel L. Jackson, it was called The Negotiator, and people are always like, is that the way it was? No, that's not this guy was like Superman, he did everything, and that's just not the way it was. We did it in a team kind of situation. We just weren't out there kind of winging it. There was method to our madness, so to speak.
Well, what's interesting is with such a diverse level of experience, would it be fair to say that you're just someone who really welcomes all these unique challenges? Tell us a little bit about your journey that led to so many different external experiences that then ultimately led you to the path of, working with people to help them achieve their own individual excellence.
Yeah, I know. If you look at my resume, it is kind of disjointed in a lot of ways. And so there's sort of a backstory that makes it a little more understandable. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And so he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed, during the Great Depression in the late 20s, early 30s. And when the gangsters, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the city, and he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son. And my dad was an infant when that happened. And come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going to law enforcement, my father was like, absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that was what my dad wanted me to do.
Right.
And so when I graduated from college, I was sort of in a quandary. My father was dying of cancer at the time. Mm-hmm. So I had two choices. I could say, hey, Dad, sorry, I know you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So if you look at my resume, my first two jobs, I was a in the marketing department at Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their corporate headquarters. And then I was a hospital administrator for a number of years. And I sort of joke, I always did what I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. So,
Oh, that's so
the
funny.
first two jobs were really because that's what my dad wanted me to do. I didn't want to cause him any more pain and suffering. So I did those. Now, I learned a lot, and I got some great experience, met some great people, but it just wasn't my passion. It wasn't the thing that I burned to do. And so I waited till my father died, and I got into law enforcement, and I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be doing that job.
Wow, that is amazing. So, wow, there's so many parallels in the sense of, in my journey, not to get into the weeds there, but it was very similar. I mean, I was very much akin to your philosophy, and it's no disrespect to our parents or the circumstances. You love and respect your parents. You want them to be happy. We're all conditioned to be people pleasers, right? So what do? We say, you know what, I'm going to do this. And at the in some part in our subconscious or even in our conscious mind, we say, okay, it's all going to work out eventually. Right. But the fact is, it does come back to really bite you in the sense of that, if you're not pursuing things that just drive you individually, it could lead to those situations where, you have to restart, renew. And I've experienced that on many levels in my life and my career. And I think it's probably one of the things that you and I probably share with respect to when we work with folks, to get them to embrace that, that reality, allow them to move forward, eliminate the guilt or the anger or the frustration that may be associated with those past decisions. Have you found that to be something that you struggle with, or tell us a little bit more about, your journey when you, obviously, as you said, a 37-year-old rookie cop.
Yeah, I don't try to look back very much. I mean, we really can't do anything about the past. We can dwell on it. We can say, why did I make that decision and all that kind of stuff. But the only thing we can really do is start from today and move forward with the decisions that we want to make, that we feel are in our best interest. Now, we certainly can learn, and we should learn. It's kind of the old Nelson Mandela quote of, I never lose, I either learn or I win. And that's kind of what I did. Was I passionate about the jobs that I had in business initially? Not really. But right. In all honesty, I learned a lot. It was like, well, okay, I'm here. I might as well see what I can glean from this. How can I be a better person? And it certainly helped me having that life experience when I went into law enforcement, when I went into and now I'm dealing with people, and I get asked from time to time, even now, and I've been out of law enforcement for about 15 years, but people will ask me, what do you recommend to me? And I always tell them, put your devices down. Go out on the street and talk to the homeless guy, go up to the penthouse and talk to that guy. Because if you can talk to people, if you can communicate with people, you will be a good cop. And that's one of the things I learned as a negotiator, was the importance of listening, and not listening to respond, not like, hurry up, Mike, say what you're going to say, because I want to get my 2 cents in, but more of a listening to understand. Okay, Mike, I hear what you're saying. I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but let's talk about where you're coming from. Now we're connecting on a more human level, and I think you and I would probably both agree, in society today, we're screaming at each other, and when we do that, I can't hear what you're saying and you can't hear what I'm saying. So the importance of listening and listening to understand, I think, was the big thing. Going back to your original question, I think a lot of people get caught up in, they want to be good, offspring of their parents. I'll do what my dad wants. My dad wants me to be a lawyer. My dad wants me to be an accountant. My dad wants me to do with this, or my mom wants me to do that, or I'm going to get in the family business, or whatever that is. But if that's not your passion, eventually I think you're going to get to a point where you sort of resent that. Whether it's a good thing or not. I mean, resent doesn't really do you any good, but right. You don't feel it's your purpose. And I try to get people to follow their passion. And people are like, well, how do you do that? I think you do it with an open heart. You find things that interest you and you explore those things. They may not be, you know, the ultimate. And I guess let me close with this. I think a lot of times we think that our purpose or our passion or our why has to be our job. It doesn't. I mean, we could have a job over here and, you know, that's what we do to pay the bills, but our purpose is to write or to be a podcast host or to volunteer or whatever it is that you feel. And I guess for your younger members of your audience, I always tell them, you know, especially for young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. But then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
100%. 100%. I can definitely relate. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that. And, you know, these are words that take, you know, to implement those takes some bravery, some courage, and recognizing you have to eliminate the fear of possible bad outcomes. And I think those are things that are ongoing for folks, that people have to recognize that we all experience these emotional feelings. And it's just a matter of being able to put them in context and get better at moving forward, despite, you know, what's going on between the two ears here, right? So, I mean, getting back to kind of where you are and in your journey, you know, you had said you've been out of law enforcement for 15 years. So was it a matter of, did you come to a point in your career there where it was like, okay, I want to now move on to another venture? What drove you to become obviously someone who's now doing motivational speaking, coaching, and then obviously an author?
Yeah, it was actually my wife, and it's always good to blame somebody else. Not really. It was, you know, when my wife met me and married me, I was a hospital administrator, you know, 8 to 5, you know, Monday through Friday suit and tie kind of guy. And, you know, you can imagine when I said, hey, honey, I'd like to totally pivot and go into law enforcement and work nights and miss birthdays and anniversaries and get shot at and all the fun stuff that cops have to deal with. And she was incredibly supportive of me. And she actually lost her job. She's always been the primary breadwinner in our family, lost her job. We were in Cincinnati, Ohio at the time. That's where I was a policeman. And she found a job in Texas. And so it was time to leave that job. And, you know, and that's something I found in law enforcement, not for a lot of officers, but for enough that it sort of registered with me, where people felt that their identity was all caught up, you know, at least for cops, you know, in that gun, in that badge, in the authority that they had. And don't get me wrong, I loved what I did, but I was more than just my job. And I knew I could find something else to do. And so initially, after I got out of law enforcement, we moved to Texas. I started a school security consulting business where I worked with private independent schools around the United States to help them shore up their security, write their policies and procedures, train their staff. And then I also coached girls high school basketball. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And actually,
I can tell you're a big fellow, man. I mean, you know, I'm this short little Italian, 5'8" on my best day, and I could tell, man. I said, this guy, he's a big dude.
Yeah, and so, you know, I played basketball in college, and you know, our daughter got my height, unfortunately or fortunately, and actually went to the United States Air Force Academy to play basketball and ultimately graduated from that. So I coached her in high school. So I sort of was wearing these dual hats when all of a sudden life kind of threw me the curveball, and I ended up with a very rare form of cancer.
Wow. That's so, and then that opened up a whole new journey, I guess, for you, obviously, that then brought you to say, hey, I want to get, I mean, tell me, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So share with me as far as, I mean, look, I have a different story. I went through some major health challenges when I was very, very, very young, totally different conversation. But I do realize that, and speaking with folks, when you get these health challenges when you're older, um, it's definitely that awakening moment. Is that what happened with you? I mean, share with us a little bit to say, okay, hey, this is what prompted you to take that next step to be a writer, motivational speaker. I mean, they're dynamic things to do.
They are. And I remembered when my father, I mentioned that my father was sick when I graduated from college. My father was dying of breast cancer back in the 1980s. And back then, they really didn't know what to do with a man with breast cancer, not to mention he waited so long before he went to the doctor that he was in the final stages of the disease. And they pretty much told him to go home and die. But he lived another 3.5 years. And I always tucked this away in the back of my brain. And I believe he did because he had a purpose in life. He was in real estate and he actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And so I sort of tucked that away. And now here I am faced with, with cancer and with more than likely, certainly a chronic, very well, a terminal disease. And I wanted to be, okay, dad had a purpose. I needed to have that purpose now. And that's where, helping people, that's where getting on, I've probably been a guest on over 500 podcasts around the world with people where writing my book was, these were things that gave me purpose. And, my cancer journey has seen me be on a drug for 5 years that gave me the flu every week for 2 or 3 days. It's seen the amputation of my foot in 2018, the amputation of my leg during the middle of the pandemic. So I've had these different challenges along the way. And what's kept me going is really what I call my 3 F's: faith, family, and friends, and having a purpose, having something to do with my life other than sit around and say, gee, woe is me. This is terrible. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you take it? Do you use it to make you a stronger and more resilient individual? Or do you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself and want other people to feel sorry for you? It's your choice how you want your life to turn out.
Yeah, well, those are brave words. And, I applaud you for, look, talk about taking the high road. I mean, I think it's an understatement on saying it. And it's very inspirational. So I wanted to just reintroduce you to the folks who may be tuning in now. So guys, if you've been listening, to the podcast, we're talking with Terry Tucker today. Terry is an amazing person with an extremely diverse background that ranges from business, law enforcement. He was a coach. He is now an author. He has written the book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And you can find that book on Amazon, and you could see and learn more about Terry on his website, motivationalcheck.com. So we are now really just talking about how Terry has overcome and is working through his cancer journey that has been ongoing, and how he's chose to really decide to thrive and make sustainable changes in his life for the better, as opposed to not sitting back, but really working in a more negative mindset. So Terry, tell us then a little bit more about the book and who your intended reader was when you started writing the book, and how that journey went about.
Yeah, the book was really born out of 2 conversations that I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to Denver with her fiance, and my wife and I had dinner with them one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she kind of looked at me and she was like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me from college on social media and asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give them the, get up early, work hard, help others kind of stuff. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if maybe I could go a little bit deeper with him. So I took some time and I was writing some notes, and eventually I had these 10 ideas, these kind of 10 thoughts, these 10 principles. And then I sent them to him. And I sort of stepped back after that and was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3-month period after I had my leg amputated and before I started chemotherapy for the tumors I had in my lungs, while I was healing, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they were real stories about real people underneath each of those principles. And that's how sustainable excellence, the 10 principles to leading your uncommon and extraordinary life, came to be.
Wow, that's incredible. It's amazing and inspiring story. And is this something that once you wrote it, I mean, is it fair to assume that this was your first venture at writing a book?
I had written kind of a huge memoir of my experience through cancer. It was like 400 pages. I never really expected to get it published, but I'd written that. Yeah, it was not something. I mean, people kept saying to me, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I was really like, no, I don't really think I should. I'm not a writer. You're right. This is my first foray into writing. And, people always ask me, well, how did you do it? I said, well, I'm a pretty simple guy. I had 2 rules. The first rule was I will write 1 page every day of the week except Sunday. I'll take Sunday off. I will write a minimum of 1 page every day. And then the second rule was I won't edit anything until I have the first draft completed. And so I would sit down at the computer on some days and I would write, in all honesty, absolute garbage. It's like, oh my God, this is terrible. But then the next day I'd write something that was better. And then maybe the next day, something a little better. And then another day of garbage. And so, I knew there was stuff I was writing that wasn't going to be part of the book. But I think, you've got to engage. You've got to do it, and you've got to learn as you go. And then once I had this manuscript, I was very lucky. Quick story about how I got it published. A friend of mine who'd been in law enforcement turned me on to this individual, Scott Silveri, and his wife, Leah. Scott was a police chief at a small town in Louisiana. And one day, one of his buddies said, hey, will you go out to California and put on a seminar for authors who want to understand police tactics so they can incorporate them in their books? And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll go out and do that. Well, he ends up going out there. He meets his wife, Leah, who's like a 40-time best-selling fiction author. He gets out of law enforcement. The 2 of them form a not-for-profit publishing company. And so I sent him the manuscript. We talked for a while, and he's like, I'd like to publish it. And so that's kind of how it came here. I was lucky. I had the ability, I had editors, I had cover designers and people who laid the book out that, a lot of times people that have to self-publish don't have that ability. So I was very fortunate in that regard.
That is just, it's funny. It's an amazing story. And it's, I applaud you for the daily discipline. But of course, based upon looking at your history and your background, the commitment to daily disciplines is not a foreign concept. I'm sure of that. What's interesting is, and what's so dynamic, is the seemingly randomness associated with, here's this fellow of yours who, it's serendipitous as far as he went to this seminar, winds up meeting his wife who has this connection to. So, I was actually had a business lunch today earlier with someone who's a local business owner. And that's what we said. We said, with just the meeting of the one person, and that was one of the things that we've talked about, how it can change your life. And one of the things we were talking about was I'm a big networker. I enjoy meeting people and connecting people. And I always just led with no real, there was no real, end game other than I just want to see how I could help folks. And it's played out fairly well as far as just who I am, as you said. Sometimes our purpose in life transcends what we anticipate. And then we can maybe look back and say, where is it that we feel our true, purpose? Where do we feel most aligned? And those are signals that we can't ignore, right? But the idea of connecting with folks, having the human experience that so many of us have really, unfortunately, have not been able to do over the last couple of years. And then when you think about how the world is changing in a dynamic that relates to, in a way, a less personable connection. Because if you think about it, and I don't want to go on a diatribe here, but you're an extremely dynamic person with an extremely dynamic background who has so much value. And it's sometimes, I know for me individually, frustrating when I say, it's really frustrating that when you look at the way society has just focused on pigeonholed kind of, labels on a person's ability to perform this or that. And I said, it's sad, because I said, it's like the end of the Renaissance person.
It is. It really is. And we limit ourselves so much. I've always believed that everything we needed to be successful in our lives is already inside us. We may need a little bit of help with,
Right.
a mentor or something like that. But everything we need to be successful is already inside us. You just have to get in there and find it and pull it out and use it to your advantage. And that's why I know people say, oh, the pandemic was terrible and, all these people were isolated, but, there was a lot of waiting that was going on. And the way I looked at it is I wanted to win the wait. I wanted to be able to say, okay, yeah, we can't go out, we can't interact with other people. And you've probably figured out, I love people. I love to be around them. It's a lot of fun. But what can I do with this? How can I win this way? Well, I can figure out what's inside me that I need to pull out and use to my benefit when things open up. But also right now, what can I do? I remember the first time somebody asked me, hey, would you be a guest on my podcast? My response was, what's a podcast?
No,
I had no
so
idea, what was
Yeah.
going on. And when I started, I had notes all around my computer and I was so nervous and I was like, I don't know what to say. And what if I make a mistake? It's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. Right. You're going to make a mistake. Nothing in life is perfect, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
Well, that's true.
Try something different. Try something outside your comfort zone. That's the way you grow. That's the way you get better. That's the way you get mentally more resilient.
That's a great point. I know for myself, and I often tell folks, yeah, we're so conditioned to do exactly that, whether we're taking notes or, feel that we have to rely upon written notes. And I'm a huge music person. I love music. And I cherish the jazz musicians who had mastered improvisation, because they're the true masters, being able to live in the moment at the highest level. And, I often equate that with, being an entrepreneur, because it is one where, and you really have to learn to thrive and operate without that safety net, without any real certainty on on any outcomes or certainty of support, or it can be very challenging. There is no doubt the world of entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but having that ability to just recognize that you could just, rely upon yourself, relax in your body, relax in your mind, not get yourself caught up in those anxious feelings, and allow all the richness of the experiences to manifest themselves through a conversation. And I think that's a really important thing. And I'm sure, you in obviously like an undercover narcotics investigator, or, you as an athlete at a high level would appreciate that, as far as the flow, allowing it to happen.
Yeah, if people that get too uptight, that, I mean, that's why, you hear about the night before a Super Bowl, the coach takes the team to a movie. We're just going to do what everybody else does, and we're just going to relax, and we're going to play the game. And you see that, especially, I think it's real prevalent in athletic competitions, especially at high levels, where teams start out and they're tight. There's like, oh, this is scary. We're on national television. This is a big deal. And then the team that relaxes and makes the fewest mistakes is usually the one that ends up winning the game. That same thing applies to us. Hey, I've got to give a talk. Oh my gosh, what if I mess up? What if you do? It's not the end of the world. I mean, we all have to pay our dues. We all have to, when I first started speaking, I was terrible. This is what happened to me. Okay, that's fine. When I was a CEO, when I started my company, here's all the mistakes I made. People don't want to make mistakes. They want to be successful. Well, I've got news for you. The road to success is paved with disasters, is paved with mistakes. So
it really
embrace them, use them.
It really is. It really is. So speaking of, as we're getting close to kind of wrapping up, it's been a really dynamic and interesting conversation. Tell us, number one, what's next on your horizon, on how you want to impact people the most way, and what's the best, way for folks who want to work with you or do things with you. What would be the best way for them to connect with you?
I guess I'll kind of flip those around. I'll answer your last question first. You mentioned my website, motivationalcheck.com. I put up a thought for the day every day. With that thought comes a question about how maybe you can apply that in your life. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message. So, that's a place where you can get to me. You can connect with me. My social media links are there. I have recommendations for books and videos and my different podcasts. In terms of your first question, what's next? I've just literally within the last couple of weeks launched a membership program off my book, Sustainable Excellence. So I'm really kind of feeling my way through that, trying to figure out the best way to do that. I'm working with somebody who has some experience on that. And then secondly, I guess, I wrote this book, Motivational or Sustainable Excellence, and it's a book about success. And I'd like to at least toy with writing another book, also about a word that begins with S, and that's significance. I think success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for other people. And don't get me wrong, I think you can be successful and significant at the same time, but those are my Sustainable Excellence membership and my potentially second book, I think, are the two things that I'll spend most of my time doing over the next couple of years, probably.
That's very cool. Well, I have no doubt that you will accomplish those goals. And for you guys, if you, like you said, I would definitely check this out. Check out the book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, by our guest today, Terry Tucker. So Terry, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your insights, your journey, and and your experience to the audience. And I hope, and I'm sure, because I know I did, I got some real great value out of it, and I'm sure the folks who are listening did as well. So thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast, Pro Tips to Grow Your Biz. I'm Mike Caluzzi, and thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day.